Hey everyone, welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to use dashes correctly in a sentence. If you are taking the PSAT, SAT, or even the ACT, this is going to be a skill that you'll be tested on. Also, knowing how to use dashes correctly in a sentence is an important writing skill. It can help you vary your sentence structure, which will make your essays more engaging. First, let's start by clarifying the difference between a dash and a hyphen. A hyphen is a punctuation mark that joins words or parts of words. Hyphens are not interchangeable with dashes. Dashes can be used to offset information in the middle of a sentence or at the end of the sentence. Let's talk about how to use dashes to offset information in the middle of a sentence. So there's actually a couple different ways you can do this. You could do it with dashes, you could do it with a pair of commas, or sometimes even parentheses. Basically, what you're doing is you're offsetting or setting apart the extra information that is interrupting the sentence. However, when you do this, you don't want to mix and match dashes with commas or dashes with parentheses. So basically, if you're going to offset extra info, you either need two dashes, one on either side, two commas, one on either side, or parentheses, one on either side. On the SAT and ACT, sometimes what they'll do is they'll have an answer choice that has a dash on one side and maybe a comma on the other, or vice versa, and these are automatically wrong. You can't mix and match that type of punctuation. Now, let's say that the extra information has a comma in it. Like maybe you're trying to offset a city, comma, state, or maybe there's a date that has a comma in it. For clarity's sake, it's usually best to either use parentheses or dashes in this case, because if you use commas, it can make it really choppy and more difficult to read. So if there's a comma in what you're trying to offset, using dashes can help with the clarity. Let's look at some correct examples. Now, I want to give a quick disclaimer. When you're trying to make a dash using your keyboard, at least what I do is I hit the dash twice. And normally on things like Google, it'll autocorrect and it'll connect those two together. There won't be a space in the middle like you see on my screen. However, the software that I use to create my slides does not allow me to do that, which is why there's a little space in between. So just pretend that little space is not there. So in the first sentence, it says, the three student president candidates, Susie, Jamal, and Layla, have tremendous support. Notice how when I was reading the sentence and I got to the dashes, I knew to pause. Also, what's between the dashes in this case are the names of the three candidates. So that extra information between the dashes is being offset. That information is not technically needed for the sentence, but it does help add clarity. Something else to keep in mind is that if we omit what's between the dashes, the sentence needs to make sense. So if we did that, it would just say, the three student president candidates have tremendous support. So in this case, the dashes are being used correctly. We're interrupting our subject and our verb by putting in the names of the candidates. That's why we need the dashes. Now let's look at the bottom example. It says, what will come, Grandpa used to say, and we'll meet it when it does. So in this case, the expression is what will come, and we'll meet it when it does. However, we want to note who said that. So in this case, it's Grandpa, and instead of putting that at the beginning or the end of the sentence, it's actually interrupting the sentence. And so because of that, we're using dashes. Now let's look at those same sentences, but in these cases, the dashes are not being used correctly. So in the top example, we still have the dashes leading into it. So there's a dash after the word candidates. So far it's fine. However, notice that after the word Layla, there's a comma and not dashes. This is like what I was talking about before, how you can't mix and match your punctuation. They do this for the wrong answer choices quite often on the PSAT, SAT, and ACT. In those instances, what you need to do is you need to look at the part that is not underlined. So in this case, if the word candidates was not underlined, but Layla with the comma was, we would want the answer choice that has Layla with a dash instead. So you make the underlined portion match the non-underlined portion in instances where you're trying to offset information. The bottom example does the same thing, it's just in reverse. This time it leads in with a comma and exits with dashes, which is also incorrect. Now let's talk about offsetting extra information at the end of a sentence. In these cases, dashes can be used very much like a colon. Now, if you need a little refresher on how to use a colon, then check out the video that I'll link in the iCards here and also in the description box below. But basically what you need to remember is that when you're using a dash at the end of a sentence or a colon, you need a complete sentence, an independent clause before that punctuation. What comes after the dash or the colon, if that's what you're using, must expand upon or clarify what comes before it. So what comes after the dash or the colon has to be related to that complete sentence that comes before it. If there is not a complete sentence before the dash or before the colon, then it's not being used correctly. Now, in terms of your own writing style, typically colons are considered a bit more formal, whereas dashes are a little bit more casual, and sometimes dashes are better at conveying emotion. So again, please ignore the font on this because there is a little space in the dash and that's not supposed to be there, but you get the idea. Here are some sentences that are written correctly. It says, there was one major difference, sugar. There was one major difference is a complete sentence. Now we're going to highlight what that difference is. In this case, it's sugar. Therefore, we have it after the dash. So it follows the rules. Complete sentence before it, and then what comes after can be as simple as one word, but it has to relate to that main independent clause. If we had wanted to, we could have written the sentence with a colon as well. The second sentence is very similar. He's afraid of one thing, snakes. So again, we're trying to emphasize the word snakes at the end of the sentence, but we have a complete sentence before it, and so it works. Now let's look at the bottom example. The American flag and the French flag have the same three colors, red, white, and blue. So in this case, it's a very similar sentence structure. However, you can see that you don't just need one word after the dash or a colon if you want to use that instead. It can be multiple words or a longer phrase. Now let's look at some incorrect examples. Again, these are the same sentence. However, the dash is now put in the wrong spot, making it written incorrectly. So for example, it says there was, and then there's a dash, one major difference. In this case, there was is not a complete thought, and so it's very odd to break the sentence up in that way. Same thing with the bottom example. The American flag has three colors. We don't typically want to separate our subject and our verb that way. So this example is also incorrect because the American flag is not an independent clause. It's not a complete sentence, so there is zero reason to have any punctuation, let alone a dash, in the middle of that sentence. All right, there you have it. Those are some quick tips as far as how to use dashes. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And also make sure that you check out the description box below. There you will find links to other grammar videos that will help you prepare for the SAT, ACT, or even the PSAT. And until next time, happy writing!